What is going on, boys? It's here on a Monday morning for our review stream of the Honda. Was a great weekend, a long one at that, I'll say. I am absolutely beat. After the event last night, I went home and just went right to bed. I had been on fumes for the last few days, right? Staying up, doing the content and whatnot. So the 11 hours of sleep we got last night was definitely pretty clutch. So feeling pretty good this morning. I thought I'd be a little bit more sluggish, but excited to get back at it. This week, we've got the API, which I made the executive decision yesterday that I will also be on site for the entire week, not just the weekend. That's what I was envisioning there a few weeks ago. But with the elevated field, Jordan Spieth out there, mostly Spieth, right? I'm going out there to watch him. So we'll have that to look forward to. But before we get into the API, right, we'll have plenty of content on that whole week's worth. Let's talk about last week at the Honda. I can see Nick's down there, says this should be fun. Yeah, I was thinking I was going to be a little bit more sluggish, but I think we're doing a little bit better than I expected. So maybe not quite as fun as you were hoping to see over there. Tom says you love the Honda Total Carnage. Yeah, it's fun to see in person too. Like, there's something for seeing these guys go out there, throw darts, and make birdies. But watching them have to manage a course, struggle, take more conservative lines is also a nice change of pace too. So I love it. He said, checked in, saw that Dietrich withdrawal, laughed, and moved on to the API. Yeah, I played a little bit of Dietrich myself too. I'll show you guys that with my player pool, but I only played 35%. So, for me, I still have 65% of my lineups live there. Now, if you used them in every lineup, that's a tough scene. Yeah, I could see why you would move on to the API if that happened. But yeah, I wasn't as big on Dietrich, so it wasn't that big for me. What's going on, Travis? Hopefully you're having a solid start to your week. And I appreciate you moving your work schedule around a little bit to catch the stream. So that's pretty sweet. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few of the contests, right? Let's get this thing rocking. We're not going to sit around for too much diddy-dally. This was your GPP winner, at least for the $5 Drive the Green last week. So this is your, large field GPP kind of contest, 71,000 entries. And if you've seen this stream the last, 3-4 months at this point, this is my main contest. Majority of my exposure, majority of my time, content, et cetera, is all catered towards either this GPP or the $20 GPP, which I'll enter from time to time, right? For the players here in a couple weeks, might, step up there from the $5 to the $20. But you see the winning lineup this week, a little bit surprising, at least in my opinion here, and we'll talk about why. But it did have two 10K players, right? I'm going to include Chris Kirk at $9,900 as a pseudo 10K option. So it had Lowry and Kirk up top, and then a bunch of 7 and 6K guys. So Justin Suh, who was obviously the nuts there in the middle of the 7K range. Benny Ann, who we had a bunch of exposure to. Brandon Wu, who didn't even do anything that special. And then, of course, Eric Cole. Now, out of these players here, I played 4 of them this week, right? I did not play Shane Lowry, and I did not play Justin Suh. Now, the reason why I said this was slightly surprising is that Shane Lowry wasn't an optimal play, right? He scored less than Justin Suh. In fact, if you take a look at some of the other top-end lineups, they don't even all have Shane Lowry. So Shane Lowry rate was $10,400 and only scored 86 fantasy points. In fact, second place had Aaron Wise, right, who was cheaper and only scored, 10 less fantasy points, 9 less fantasy points, something like that. Rest of the lineup, you had guys like a 49th there for an Adam Svenny. So a bunch of these guys that finished in the top, right, had far from perfect lineups. Just look, third place didn't have Lowry, right? This is more the lineup that I was expecting to win because you were being completely inefficient, right, with that Lowry ownership. But what it did is it got you to guys like Eric Cole, right? If you had to spend up twice in that 10K range, it led you to a place in terms of lineup construction that a lot of other people weren't willing to get to. So like if you look at like third place here, right? Like they have an Eric Cole, they do have a Brandon Wu. So they did take more of like a studs and duds heavy approach. But a lot of the other lineups that finished up here, like don't have guys, well, most of them have Eric Cole, right? Because he finished in second place was the nuts. But like if we look at my top lineups, for example, right? It's lineups that are more balanced like those top end players, but I wasn't fitting in Eric Cole to these top end lineups. I was more focusing on living in that 7K range, a little bit more balanced. And though I had a ton of Eric Cole this week, right? He was one of my value plays. I played 20% Eric Cole. The 20% of my lineups that I needed to have Eric Cole, not one of them had him. In fact, if we go through my top lineups, you're going to see that none of them have Eric Cole in them, which is just unbelievably frustrating. I mean, look at this. Of the guys that were finishing there in the top 5 of the GPP, 4 of the players are the same here, right? Among a lot of those lineups. I mean, heck, even a bunch of them did have Aaron Wise right there, who finished in 29th place. SH Kim was in this lineup. And you guys are going to realize real quickly that I'm not a fan of SH Kim this week. So my top lineup had SH. My second best lineup also had SH Kim. My third best lineup also had SH Kim. Fourth, you guessed it. And, my fifth lineup is the first time you get to a lineup that doesn't have SH Kim. And like Tom was saying, there's the Dietrich withdrawal, right? So I wasn't completely immune to it myself. In fact, I had lineups that were scoring pretty well to that point that had Thomas Dietrich in it, but so is PGA DFS, right? He wasn't going to make the cut anyways. So I know a few people were tilted about it. We're like, oh, why would you withdraw? It's such like a pansy thing to do, so on and so forth. But he was going to miss the cut. He was like +6, +7. It wasn't like he was making the weekend anyways. Wasn't pulling a Hideki where he was getting withdrawn or DQ'd after being in contention. So I'm not that mad at Dietrich. I'll go right back to him. I'm not going to hold any grudges there. But let's see, Kuchar, right? I had a lineup up there with Kuchar. Still nothing with an Eric Cole. So just every lineup that I had a Cole for, I mean, if we fish down a little bit, we'll find our first Eric Cole lineup, had 2 missed cuts. There was a lot of lineups that had Dietrich in it, so on and so forth. So despite having Kirk, I played 40% this week. Despite having a bunch of Straka who played well, a bunch of Benny Ann, Eric Cole, these value plays, I lost money in this GPP. And I, like doing these videos, these streams to be as transparent as humanly possible, because you'd think for somebody that hit the nuts with, I don't know, at least 4 out of the 6 spots, that you'd at least make a little bit of money, right? But no, if you aren't perfect, if you aren't getting one of those top 1-2% lineups, you're going to lose money in this GPP. It doesn't matter how good your picks were. It doesn't matter, how many of those top 5, top 6 players that you have in your player pool. If you don't execute correctly, right, and get them into the same lineups, it's not going to matter. So last week, you guys heard me complaining a whole bunch about my optimizer, how I was annoyed I wasn't getting enough, combinations or enough of a mix of combinations, and the same shit happened. So I didn't have time to go out there and fix it in between the 2 weeks there. And it caught me again. So I can tell you for a fact this week that I will be, changing up the optimizer, trying to fix that this week, because we're not going to make the same mistake 3 times in a row. So that was a little bit unfortunate. Let's catch up on chat, see if anybody has any comments down there. Louis says, great call on Eric Cole. Think you shouted him out on Wednesday. Yeah, talked him up on Wednesday, but he was also a value play. So I did an entire video on Eric Cole. I wasn't the only one who talked him up this week. Now, I might have been one of the first ones to talk up Eric Cole, but after I put up my video early on Tuesday, I saw a few people tweeting him out there on Wednesday, actually a few people that even took him outright by the time he got to Wednesday. So they probably didn't see my content. I mean, they may have, right? That may have influenced them a little bit, but he was just a solid play. I mean, the form was there. The shots gained metrics were there just across the board. The guy was going out there and checking all the boxes we were looking for. And it was a pure analytics play, right? It's not like we were very familiar with his game. It's not like Eric Cole was being showed very much on the broadcast. It was more so we know what stats to look for at the Honda or just for a good player in general. And he checked all of them off. And of course, this is the week that we got paid off because honestly, I don't even know what his best finish was before this week. I think it was like a top 25 at best. And I'm not even sure if he had that top 25 before this week. So, sometimes the analytics are going to, push us towards a player before the results get there, right? Before you're starting to see those top 25 finishes. And that was definitely the case with Eric Cole. Tom says, yeah, same. Basically, all the money you did revolved around Cole. Yeah, unfortunately, I was on the other side, guys. All my best lineups didn't have Eric Cole. I ended up having solid lineups despite that, right? You can see 533rd out of 71,000 entries isn't anything to scoff at, right? I'm playing 150 lineups, so you'd hope I'd get something up there in the top 150, right? That's statistically, you should have at least one top, 500 lineup if you have 150 lineups. But if Eric Cole was down there, except for SH Kim, I mean, this lineup, just that change alone, right? I mean, I'd have extra salary to spend as well, puts me up there into the top 5 GPP lineups. And then if I take that extra salary, right, and maybe spend up from a Davis Riley and take another AK option, oh boy, it could have been a takedown. So is what it is. I'm not gonna dwindle on that too much. Do you have your own opto? I've been using the solver. Yeah, I have my own optimizer, so I don't have to subscribe to somebody else's. Mine's completely customizable. Yeah, I prefer the one that I make myself over any else because I can change everything I want. I could set any custom rules. So rather than having to go in and actually type in players for roles, I can say I want at least 4 AMT times in every lineup, or I want at least 5, right? I can change the metric in there and do it. So all of my optimizer works off of flags. So essentially, I import stats from a database using flags. I'll say, okay, I only want the last 24 rounds, flag every player with 24 rounds, and import those stats. So that means I can customize it with anything. So if I want to optimize based on driving distance, I can go out there and do so. If I want to optimize based on average apex height, right, which is something you're not going to find on any other database out there, that's why I like my optimizer. I don't know, if you're somebody that can program, like, why would you buy an optimizer, right? Use somebody else's program when you can get it for free. You don't have to spend all that money, and it's more efficient. So, hey, if it's working for you, I love it, Travis, but I'm going to prefer the one that I make myself. Even if it doesn't give me the Eric Cole I want this week, we're going to figure it out, right? I don't want to spend money for somebody else's opto that I have no influence over how it works. So like they give you the programming, right? If you want to make it more volatile, right? You want to make it spread out your lineups a little bit more. You can't tell the solver to do that, right? Like that's why I do my thing. Nick says 77% Kirk, 33% Cole, and 27% Suh. You got 0, 6 of 6. That's rough, bro. I honestly had guys like Dietrich miss the cut. I had Kuchar miss the cut. I had like 3 or 4 guys in the 8K range that all shit the bed this week. That's always going to happen at the Honda, by the way. Like, you just got to get used to getting guys that miss the cut. Yet I still had 15 6 of 6s. So that's rough, Nick. I mean, 77% Kirk, you'd think that you'd at least get a through 6 of 6s few through. You got to let us know. You got to inform us, Nick. What was your issue? Was it the 7K range? Was it the 6K range that didn't go well for you? Because those 3 spots, right? You'd figure you have at least a 3 of 6 right there. All right, yeah, you got to let us know, bro. That's kind of strange. Honestly, it's kind of hard. I don't know. You may not have played 150 lineups. You may have only played like 15 to 20. If you played 150 with those 3, you definitely should have had a 6 of 6. Let's hop over to the community contest now. That was actually for Showdown. We'll go over that here in a second. A few things I want to point out on Showdown for round 2 that I thought were important that we can learn from. But the community contest was taken down by Jay Roman this week. So if you guys, this is now the section where we go over all of your lineups. Feel free to go ahead and toss your name down in chat, and we'll review your lineup. But we're going to go over Jay Roman to begin, who James Romanowski, huge member of the community, one of the OGs around here, took down the contest. Not a surprise. The guy is extremely bright. Went with Minwoo up top, which I loved his upside this week. So definitely there at 24%. Aaron Wise, JT Poston. So he got 6 of 6 through. He had an Eric Cole, which of course ended up being his top scorer there. And nothing crazy, right? I mean, outside of the Eric Cole top 10, his next best finish was a 21st from Ben Griffin. Very consistent performances from guys like a Benny and Aaron Wise. He was relatively spread out with the salary, right? He skipped that 10K range like I did in a majority of my builds and took 2 9Ks, 1 8K, and lived in the 7K. This kind of lineup, while it wasn't going to take down a GPP this week, in single entries, you were in probably the top, 2 to 5%, pretty much in any contest that you were entering. So I like what you were going with here. I would say because you were skipping the 10K range, you could take some of these chalky players, right? So like Ben Griffin was relatively high owned. Benny Ann, right, was getting quite a bit of attention this week. And even guys like a Wise, Poston, and Eric Cole weren't like 5% owned. Right now, this 10% on Eric Cole was a little bit higher in our contest just because it was somebody I talked up this week, right? Had in some of my video content. But you could still have an optimal build here, even with pretty much everyone in your lineup having at least 7% ownership, because you skipped the guy that was 50% owned, right? You skipped that Sun Jam. You skipped going to a Shane Lowry, right? That helped you balance, at least I would say box out like 50% of the field. This is the perfect kind of lineup for a single entry, but even if he went with this in a larger field kind of contest, he could have gone away with it as well. So I thought that was a great lineup. I like how you started down there at Minwoo. I mean, even starting with like a Chris Kirk, right, was getting a little bit too close to the 10K range. It just changes up the rest of your lineup construction, right? Rather than taking, let's say, a JT Poston, you might have been at the bottom end of the 8K range, which actually might have gone better, right? Because Poston didn't have the best week. Maybe you got to a Moronk. But from the long-term perspective, I think that extra salary, right, getting to the more safe, quote unquote, I would call him a safe option, right, in JT Poston, as opposed to like a Moronk down at the bottom of the 8K range, was the way to go. So I like that quite a bit. T. Swenson, I know you're down there in chat, so we're just going to go over your lineup here. You finished in 3rd this week. Let's see. So you had Sanjay up top. I have to say, not my favorite play, but hey, it was in a single entry. So let's look at the rest of your lineup. Pivot and Billy Horschel. Straka was relatively low owned. I like that. SH Kim, I loved him this week. You know I'm not a big fan of SH Kim now, though, because of what happened to me with those top 4 lineups. But love Dylan Fratelli. Love the fact that you got a 6 of 6 through here. Tyler Duncan was one of the best plays on the slate. I had him in a few lineups too. You guys saw over here. We were going through a few of those top lineups. I believe, yeah, like my 5th best lineup had a Tyler Duncan in it. Just unfortunately, none of mine were 6 of 6s. So hats off to you and going out there, actually getting a 6 of 6 through with Tyler Duncan. Unfortunately, you would wish, SH Kim would have performed better for you. Of course, Sun GM had a really down week. So that was never really going to go well for you. But I have no issues with this, right? You took the chalky player, but you did force in a couple pivots, right? Like a Straka and a Billy Horschel. And then, for Telly and Tyler Duncan, you're looking at sub 5% ownership in most GPPs. So I think that you could have gone away with this even in a large field GPP just because you did have those pivots down low. But for a single entry, more than okay. Solid lineup, I would say. You should have taken Chris Kirk up top, though. If you're going to take a large field GPP stance, I don't know. I felt like Sun JM this week. I don't want to call him like an egregiously bad play, but he was like 40% owned. I don't know if I could have gone behind that. Even if he won the golf tournament this week, I would have been on the stream here telling you guys, I was like, I'm not all that worried about it, right? Like if a 40% owned guy ends up winning the golf tournament, then so be it, right? Like I'm not going to beat those 40% of people most likely anyways, right? With the other 5 spots. So I like the lineup, though. Good job. You kicked my ass in the contest. We'll look at my lineup here in a second. It was not good. Yeah, you had Dietrich and Rye. Yeah, I no Rye for myself, but yeah, Dietrich's that kind of guy, right? He's added to the shit list, as Jacob has says. He said you'll never draft Dietrich again for his withdrawal for allergies. I'll probably get back to him the next tournament he plays because a lot of people are going to have that same kind of sentiment, right? They're not going to want to play the guy after he has a severe case of vaginitis out there, but that means he's going to be low owned. He's still a world-class player. I'm probably not going to hold that grudge, but hey, I don't blame you if you do. It was annoying as hell, that's for sure. Only did 20 maxes this week. Makes sense. Yeah, if you had 20 lineups, much more excusable to not have a 6 of 6. You played Akshay. What a roller coaster following him. Yeah, I didn't play him, but I followed him quite a bit on the course. He's young up-and-coming talent, great kid. Of course, has the social media following, so it's real easy to root for and cheer for an Akshay Bhatia. The ball striking stats, I have to say, were fantastic. Now, he was a little bit inconsistent. I believe it was round 3. He struggled a little bit. And then round 4, he was hitting a few darts, got him to that 4 foot mark. And then for a few of his putts, right, was just 20 feet out and missing everything. I mean, he 3-putted like 4 times there on Sunday. So, yeah, fantastic kid. Great to see him go out there, have that success. But I don't know, a little inconsistent. He's got to get that figured out. Like he looks like Tiger Woods one day, looks like 50-year-old dusty old Zach Johnson the next. It's just, he's all over the place. Appreciate the feedback. Of course, you faded him in every other lineup. Gotcha. Yeah, I thought he was one of the worst plays of the week. So I didn't want to give you too much of a hard time there, Travis. But yeah, I mean, even in that kind of contest, like people are still going to play him because it's Sun GM, right? Like people are going to have that FOMO and get there. So I know what you were trying for, right? You were trying to, get a little bit cute there with playing somebody that I faded. Probably not the best choice. There's a reason why I fade them. I don't just fade people based on ownership alone. SH Kim only making 6 birdies hurt. Yeah, I agree. I had him in a bunch of lineups too. So I'm there with you. Let's look at a few others. I know Nick's down there. So we're going to look at Nick's lineup, which is a lot better than mine. When we get down to my lineup, you guys are going to laugh a little bit. So you had Kirk, you had Ryan there. Okay, so you had Dietrich and Ryan in this contest. I know you were mentioning that earlier. I know you're all about your DP World Tour guys. So, Thomas Dietrich, I know you have a soft spot for him. I do too. That was a little unfortunate. Aaron Rye. Now, I didn't play Aaron Rye this week. I just couldn't. There were guys around him that I slightly preferred, but I thought he was a good play, right? Like he plays decent under difficult conditions. That's where you've seen him have some of his top end finishes on the DP World Tour. I mean, even on the PGA Tour, a lot of his like top 15s, top 10s have been at courses where like 15 under par or worse is winning. So I understand the play. I wouldn't hold that against you. The Thomas Dietrich thing, again, sometimes you're just going to get got out here for PGA DFS. So I wouldn't look into that too much. Again, people out there, they're saying they're never going to play them again. I understand it, but that's why some people like myself, lick our chops when people start saying that kind of thing, because all that's going to do is make Thomas Dietrich like twice as good of a play the next time around. It's going to make him that much better of a guy to get to. So, all right, I like your lineup there. Justin Sub was a stud. Great call there, Nick. Danny Willett down there, 6% ownership, another solid play, another guy who likes difficult golf courses. Seabez. So it kind of looks here like you went with like a correlated lineup. I don't know if this was something you were thinking about when making it, Nick, but like Kirk even good at relatively difficult courses, right? Almost won the API last year. Dietrich, maybe not so much, but pretty much everyone else here, like Seabez, Rye, Danny Willett, and then Kirk here, all hardcore specialists. So maybe that's something you were going with. Maybe it was by chance. I don't know. But either way, I like what you were doing there. And let's let's scroll down and find my lineup here in 42nd place. We had a 3 of 6. We had in this lineup, by the way, I went with a pure contrarian approach. You can see my most expensive player was Denny McCarthy at $9,100. So I took that strategy that I've talked about a few times over the last few weeks, at least for single entries, and said, you know what happens if we just try and jam in like 5 players that we really like this week, right? 8, 9K players that I thought had a really good chance at making the cut. And of course, Thomas Dietrich withdrew, right? I was a part of that there too. But Denny McCarthy missing the cut was, he just played like dog shit on Thursday. No other way to explain that, right? He shot under par there on Friday, but shot +5 on Thursday. And then Cam Davis, I was following him all day there on Friday, was well within the cut line for, I think, 14 holes. And then his last 4 ended up making 2 bogeys. And on the last, he did have a birdie putt to go out there and what would have eventually ended up making him the cut. And he lipped out. So that was an unfortunate one to see in person, to be a part of and whatnot. But I like what I was doing here, right? I had a lot of the same players as a Nick there. So I kind of like what he was doing there too. But I went for just this extremely balanced approach out there, trying to hopefully get a 6 of 6 through. Like that's the idea when you try and take like all 8, 9K players, right? Like my cheapest guy was Will Gordon down here. I was hoping to get 6 of 6 through and hopefully just end up finishing in the top 2, top 3 of the contest based on that alone. And when you don't get the 6 of 6 through, you could be looking at a pretty rough week when it comes to the single entry. So my single entry when it came to this week, at least for main slate, wasn't my best. For our showdown, I wanted to show you guys this a little bit earlier. This is showdown, right? So this missed cut is kind of irrelevant, right? It's just on there because it was for round 2 showdown. But in round 2 showdown, guys, Chris Kirk was way higher owned than I expected. In fact, guys like Pendrith were 43% owned in this single entry, so on and so forth. The reason why I want to point this out is that the pivots, the guys that we think are going to be super low owned when it comes to GPPs on Showdown, are now starting to become the chalk when it comes to high dollar single entries. So this was a $100 entry here. There were, I think, only like 55 entries total. Let's see. Yeah, 55 entries total here. In these kind of contests, you know, you can see Saul Goodman's in here. He's one of like the bigger DFS players. Anguilla, actually know him. One of my buddies, he's actually won the Millie Maker a few times before. A few guys down here in like the top 10, top 20, like Mr. Good Seats, like he's, you know, one of the sharps out there, one of the higher volume players. Fire Dog in this contest, Can't Fade Me, M. Pendle. All of these guys down here are quote unquote like DFS pros, right? So like Mock Lovin, like all these sort of guys. If you're going to play in one of these smaller field, higher dollar single entries, you almost might just want to start taking the chalk. And this is why I wanted to point this out, because let's go find a few of the pieces of quote unquote chalk here. So let's find a lineup with Sanjay. And again, this was from round 2, so Sanjay really sucked. So yeah, look, Sanjay, 72% owned. So some of the mega chalk gets even more mega chalky, but some of the guys that are like average ownership, let's find those for you. Like Aaron Wise went way down in ownership, right? Day 2, Horschel, Lowry were essentially unowned. Down here, Horschel, right, essentially unowned. Let's see, Bramlett, 3.6%, 1.8% for Ben Taylor, who, again, he had that massive Thursday, right? He was like one of your first, he was close to first round leader, right? Thereafter Thursday, no one wanted to play him. So the ownership is just looking extremely polarized here, whether it's Sanjay nearly 75%, or even some of the guys that we were putting out as pivots that I think everyone was looking at to be pivots were like twice as owned as they should be. Like Chris Kirk, I had projected for lower ownership than Billy Horschel, of course, because Billy Horschel shot -5 the first day. And Billy Horschel, rather than being like 30% chalk in this contest, was owned in 9% of lineups. So I'm looking at some of these past results, I mean, especially for these single entries, and trying to think of a way to maybe alter our strategy, because if I knew ahead of time, right, that like Shane Lowry down here, just to give you an example, let's go up one more. Shane Lowry's going to be 9%. If Horschel after shooting -5, I knew he was going to be 9%, or Moronk after his good first day, right, was going to be 3.6% owned, they would be the easiest GPP plays for Showdown in human history. Like you would just jam them into your lineups, take the game theory approach, and move on. Whereas if I knew that somebody like Taylor Pendrith, right, was going to be 50% owned in this contest, Cam Davis nearly 40%, or Brandon Wu, right, a value play, right, 35% owned, those also would have been some of the easier fades to make in human history. So I wanted to bring this up. I know it's for Showdown. It's not for the main slate, which of course is our focus here. But some of these ownership trends, at least in the higher dollar stuff, are slightly concerning. The only reason I say that is like our huge edge when it comes to Showdown is like taking advantage of the casuals, right? And it's looking like our advantage for taking advantage of the casuals and the way that they only play guys at the top of the board might only be restricted to some of those larger field GPPs now, right? Contests where you have like 2,000, 3,000 entries, contests where you're not entering $100 to get into the contest, because those kind of players tend to be sharper. They're clearly starting to play DFS a little bit differently when it comes to your Showdown. And I think it's something that we need to consider going forward, something that we need to account for in our lineups. Let's go ahead, bring up my projections now. We're going to go through ownership, some of my personal results, player pool, that sort of thing. So let's go ahead, bring that up and catch up on chat, see what's going on. Still made over 100 with 0-6 of 6s, so couldn't be a total loss. There you go. Yeah, hey, if you still made money, dude, that tells you exactly what you were looking at, right? Like I said, you played a bunch of Kirk that had to have paid off at some point, Cole and stuff. Good to hear, Nick, right? If you're able to get your entries back and you had 0-6 of 6s, that's a dub, right? That's a dub on one of those weeks. When are the Pro V1s going to make it onto the trophy case? Oh, we can't put the evidence onto stream there. It's in fact why I didn't mention it on stream the other day. So let's stay a little hush about that, Travis. But I do have a ton of Pro V1s over here in the corner that have PGA Tour stamps on them. I'm just going to leave it at that. David says 5-6 with Kuchar. Yeah, that's not bad. I mean, if you got a 5-6, you probably cash this week, particularly if you had like a Eric Cole in that lineup. So, okay, not so bad. If you want me to look at your lineup in the contest, just go ahead and let me know. Clay says, took second in the contest, but finished dead last in the winner takes all. Feel free to roast that one. Yeah, let's go do that real quick. Let's hop back over to Draftkings, and let's take a look at both those lineups. So we'll start with the good. How about that? So let's go up to second place. I did see you up there, Clay. I think that's a couple weeks in a row that you've had a good lineup in this contest. So hats off to you. You're kicking our butt right now. Horschel wise, love it. Had plenty of lineups with those two. I thought they had more upside than what they finished at. So no issues for me there. I like Denny, right? He was in my lineup. Ben Griffin, Ben Martin, Eric Cole. Fantastic lineup. So what I like that you really did here is you were maybe like a little bit of a hybrid approach when it comes to studs and duds, because you did still take 2 6K options. Now, right, they were at the top of the 6K. So it's not like you were jamming in like a $6,300 golfer, but you did force in 3 9K guys, right? So rather than maybe going like 2 9K, 1-8, and then being a little bit more balanced, you forced yourself to be slightly uncomfortable and take those 6K options, which is going to give you that leverage, right? They're going to be some of the lower owned plays on the slate. So if you entered this in a GPP, you could probably have gotten away with it. But what I really like about it is you've skipped like the middle 7K range, right? So from like Ben Griffin down to $7,000, there was a lot of chalk there and a lot of players that didn't end up performing all that well this week. And by avoiding that, I think that's how you got your 5 of 6 through. And of course, it's why you're able to land on guys like a Ben Martin and an Eric Cole down low, who performed a lot better than those guys in the 8K range. So I like what you're doing there. Let's go ahead and let me bring up the other contest. So I know you said you wanted me to roast it. We're going to take it pretty easy on you because, again, you kicked most of our butts in the other contest. So I don't think it would be fair to give you flack for that, but let's go ahead. We'll bring it up. You're saying you came in last in that contest? Ooh. Yeah, I came in 20th, so I wasn't much better. So we can roast mine too. It was the same lineup as the other contest, though. So, okay, we got my lineup there. And then you said you came in dead last. Let's see. Ooh, you almost had the 6 of 6 missing the cut. I've actually had that happen a few times. One of the rarest things to happen in PGA DFS. But I liked all these guys too. Yeah. Hey, sometimes that happens, Clay, right? You're going to finish in second in one contest, win 9x your money. And then in the other contest, going to go out there and finish dead last. That's just PGA DFS for you in a nutshell, right? The same guy that made this lineup that was beautiful, right? That took Ben Martin and Eric Cole together, put together a lineup that put together 5 of 6. So, hey, if you're out there, you had a little bit of a rough week when it came to 6 of 6s. Use Clay as an example, right? Kicked our butt, made some pretty solid lineups. It still had a 5 of 6 out there, right? That's just going to happen from time to time. Let's see. What's Nick saying down there? Nick says, finish top 10 in round 2 showdown in the large GPP. Yeah, I was in the same contest as you for sure. I was over there playing in that contest. I played in a $200 single entry too, Nick. And I think in the one that you're talking about, I ended up not min cashing by like 2 spots. So if you would have gone down to that contest, Nick, it would have been 1 spot I wouldn't have cashed by. And then, maybe I get an extra birdie there and we cash. It's all your fault, Nick. Just kidding. Get stuff there in the cash. I saw you in the contest when I was going to enter, and I was like, oh, I get to play against Nick today. This will be fun. That's awesome. Optimizers, man. Yeah, I gotta exactly right because like you had the same player pool, right? And the optimizers just spin out different lineups. That was the bane in my existence this week with Eric Cole and was last week. So I'm right there with you. Clay optimizers, great, super helpful, but also extremely annoying from time to time. Well, let's go through this. So what we want to focus on here, there's a lot of numbers on the screen, right? So I'm going to zoom in. We're just going to focus on the right side here. So let's do that. There we go. Let's actually get it lined up. Perfect. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to go through, my player pool, the kind of guys that I was getting to, and then the kind of ownership I was expecting versus where they came in. Because this column right here, column O over here, where it says ownership diff percentage, is how right or wrong I was on projections. And you can see there were guys like Billy Ho that it came in exactly right when it came to ownership. And then up top, more people got to Sanjay than I was even expecting. And around the industry, the projections for him were pretty close to 38%. So the industry as a whole, they seemed to be correct this week when it came to ownership. And I was off there. I thought that people would take that game theory approach, look at Sanjay at that 40% number and go, you know what? Have at it, you 40%, right? If you guys are going to go out there and win with a super chalky player, then I don't want to be a part of that. And it looks like people did not care, which is surprising considering that guys like John Rahm a few weeks ago, people were rejecting for like 30% ownership. He came in at 23%. But this week, I guess because there weren't any, obvious places to pivot to, right? There weren't, Rory McIlroy up top, right? There wasn't a Scotty Scheffler in this kind of field. People felt the obligation to play a Sanjay M. So it's worth noting if we get in one of these weak field events, which this is going to happen more and more this year because of the elevated events, when you have a tournament that's sandwiched in between a bunch of them, you're not going to get many top-end players to show up. And when we get a Sanjay M or a Shane Lowry in this kind of field, they're probably going to be this mega chalk, right? 40% number that we saw this week. So something that I'm probably going to account for going forward now is, the pivots around him, right? If there's no one else in the 10K range that people are willing to get to, you're going to see 40% ownership on a few of these players. So again, I think it's just a byproduct of the elevated fields, of the fact that there was pretty much nobody but a Sanjay here. But yeah, 40%, I faded him. I would have liked to fade him even more if I knew he was going to be 38%. And that ownership almost entirely was taken away from Shane Lowry. So the reason why I overprojected Shane Lowry by 7.4% was because I thought that people would just make that quick pivot, right? I thought that people would give Shane Lowry a lot more respect than they did. And unfortunately, if I would have known he was 17%, I would have played Shane Lowry in a bunch of lineups. In fact, he would have easily been that pivot I made, right? Because Shane Lowry loves the course. He had karma going for him, should have won last year. So I felt like the golf gods almost owed him something this year. So on Sunday, I didn't have a bet on Shane Lowry, but I kind of was rooting for him. Him or Eric Cole. Eric Cole's from Delray Beach. That's where I'm from down here. So a lot of my friends actually know Eric Cole. A couple of my friends are like best friends with his wife. So out there, we were really rooting for him. Same thing with Shane Lowry. But if I knew he was 17%, it wouldn't have just been me rooting for Shane Lowry. I would have probably had an outright bet on him, and I probably would have had him in most of my DFS lineups. So the reason why we do these streams, the reason why we look at these results are to figure out where things went wrong, right? And clearly up top, my ownership projections were just swayed in one direction versus the other. So Sanjay M, God, why did you have to be 40% owned? I wish I would have known that. Would have made Shane Lowry an even better play. But because I made that mistake, right, I'm going to put mistake in quotes there, right? Now, Chris Kirk became the play that I got to, right? And of course, he won the tournament. I played 40% of them this week. So I ended up getting about 2.5x leverage to the field. We ended up going with Billy Ho, right? That looked pretty good after day one. So it's not like that mistake up top was super detrimental. I mean, having Lowry and Chris Kirk together would have been nice because then it would have forced an Eric Cole into some of those lineups, right? To try and save that salary. But yeah, Chris Kirk was the nuts, right? He's the guy that you had to have. I mean, ideally, probably a Chris Kirk. You wanted to mix in at least one of these 8K options, most likely an Aaron Wise, who, believe it or not, a lot of people were giving Aaron Wise crap this week, right? They're like, oh, Aaron Wise, like he's like freaking 30th place, hardly made the cut, whatever. Talking all this shit about the core play. He was like the best player in this range. He scored more points than Minwoo. He scored more points than everyone down to a Sepp Straka and a Johnny Vegas, who were in the 8K range, right? So you didn't have to go from, let's say, a Chris Kirk down to the 8K range. You could have very easily played Aaron Wise too, right? So that's why when we looked at the GPP, a lot of those top end lineups still had him there. So, I think people are always expecting like a top 5 finish from these guys in the 9K range, but it's all relative, right? If Aaron Wise ends up being the best play in that range, he's the guy you got to have, right? Even if he just finishes and tied for 29th place. So I like to see that, right? Like I played a bunch of them this week. People are giving me shit about it. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like the guy was the best play in that range. Like what, you want everyone to finish in first place? Like, come on. Like, and sorry, I don't mean to like swear, get all, up in arms about that, but you get the point, right? Like people are just expecting all of their plays to finish in first place, and that's just not realistic. You could have started, I suppose, with a Chris Kirk and then like jammed in, let's say like a Vegas, a Sepp Straka, and Eric Cole, but then you're talking about leaving a bunch of salary on the table, right? Like you'd want a Justin Saw. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Ben Taylor, you could have gone away with playing. I mean, Eric Cole down here, over 110 points. To create the perfect lineup this week, you had to leave like $2,000-$3,000 of salary on the table, and no one was going to do that. Like in their right mind, no one's going to go out there and leave $3,000 on the table when they're playing in PGA DFS. So the whole point of this is to show you that there were a bunch of different ways to get to that optimal lineup, and as long as you were able to get one of those different paths down, there were just so many different ways to get to that top 5. So it's worth noting there. The optimal lineup, I didn't go and look at the actual amount of points it scored, but the winning lineup in the GPP, just to give you an idea here, scored 565 points. And the optimal this week was well over 600 points. So the guy that took down 25 grand, right, took down a contest against 71,000 other people, was about 50 points off of the max total score. So once again, just pointing that out to show you that you don't have to be perfect to take these contests down. Game theory, all of that just is the name of the game. You don't have to have that perfect combination. Let's see what's going on in chat. If there's any questions down there. No, looks like we're good. All right, so let's go through this bottom end of the 7K range and then hop on out of here. I've got a bunch of content to get done, Airbnbs to book when I'm going over there to the API, so we'll get to it. Let's see, Lee Hodges was a pretty good fade. I actually played him in Showdown over the weekend, so I thought he would turn it around, which he did. So we got a pretty good use out of Lee Hodges this week, I would say. Like the Benny Ann play, guys like SH Kim, Davis Riley, they made the cut. I just really would have wished they'd done, did a little bit more with it. They were some of my higher exposed plays on the slate. Down here at the bottom of the 7K, just a bunch of guys that were average at best. So, before I was telling you guys, like maybe fading the 7K range was the move. Here's why, right? Like Brandon Wu was your top end score, right? He scored 78 points. Justin Saw, like the one guy in this range that went off, scored 90 points. Now, unless you had Justin Saw, most of the guys here around him kind of hurt you, right? Now, Ben Griffin, 76 points. Garrett Higo, 76 points. Weren't killing you, but they surely weren't the 90 points you were getting from a Justin Saw or an 89 points you were getting from a Ben Taylor. Most of the range here, there's a lot of missed cuts mixed in. You can see the red there. Those are all guys that ended up missing the cut. But then also guys that were just scoring like 50, 60 fantasy points, which is pretty much neutral for your lineup. It wasn't getting much done. But then down here towards the 6K range, right, is where you have an Eric Cole. But then a bunch of the guys scoring the same, right? Like 76 points, 80 fantasy points, who at that price tag are much better for your lineup than those guys that were more expensive, more chalky, and probably like 5-10 times the ownership there in the 7K range. So perhaps when we play the Honda next time around, we want to consider these 6K guys even more. It's a volatile event. You're going to see that. I mean, look at this. Tyler Duncan, right? 100 points. Lingworth at 78 points. I mean, this would have been a heck of a player to have in your lineup too. Better than most of the 8K options. Cameron Percy, right? another solid score down here. Ryan Gerard. Right now, no one was going to play Ryan Gerard. The guy was a freaking amateur Monday qualifier, but scored nearly 100 fantasy points. So there's a lot of times, especially in these like elevated field events or like the stronger field stuff that we've seen over the past few weeks, that you want to jam in a bunch of these like 8, 9K guys. But when the field's going to be this weak, the game theory approach just says to leave some salary on the table and spend down, right? So the next time we play here at the Honda, I'm trying to think of what the next super weak field will be. It's not the Heritage because that'll actually be an elevated field this year. Sometime over the next 2-3 months, right, we're going to get a field like the Honda here. And I think going from like $7,800 down to like 73 or $7,200 and fading almost that entire range, not the worst idea. And you can see, like, I played a ton of these guys here, right? And that was, I would say, probably the biggest mistake that I made this week, right? Was taking guys that were slightly overpriced, way higher end than they probably should have been, and taking my shots off of that 6K range. So that's something that I may adjust going into the next event like this. But yeah, just something I wanted to point out. That's all we've got for this stream. If there's any questions, we'll go over them. If not, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I appreciate everybody for stopping by. You guys are the DFS hardcores out there, the guys that are actively looking to improve their process, and ladies, I should say, right? It's becoming a much larger field. Everyone getting into DFS, you got to love it. We've got ourselves 2 huge weeks coming up, one that I'll be at in person for sure the entire week. This week, I'll know in the next 30 minutes or so when I'll be up there at the API, but likely going to be up there for the Wednesday practice round. We'll be doing our live stream from up there at Bay Hill to give you guys some of that insider info. And then likely going to be on site for, I don't want to say like guaranteed I'm going to be there all week, but there's a very good chance I'll be there all week. So looking forward to it. Of course, Louis, glad that you stopped on by. Hit that like button on the way out, fellas. And I'll see you guys today for the rest of the content.